All right. Good morning, Alyssa. Good to see you. How are you today?
Doing great, thank you.
Wonderful. And good morning, everyone who's joining us, either live or recorded. Today we're going to give an introduction to spectral radius and various different topics. I will go into PowerPoint now and show you some of those. So we're going to be first talking about eradicating hunger in Seattle. Then we'll shift gears to the topic of eradicating world hunger, and we'll talk about the central mechanism for achieving that, which will be the compassionate economy, and then finally we'll talk about this medium, which is spectral radius. So the first topic is hunger in Seattle. And in fact, all of these topics we're going to cover in the form of essentially a brief introduction, and we're going to talk about the topics that we'll cover when we get into it in more depth and the various different people who we are inviting to the conversation. So the topic of hunger in Seattle, we're first going to talk about hunger in the United States, the current state of hunger across the country, and how it impacts different segments of the population, different geographies, different age groups, et cetera, et cetera. And then from there, we'll focus in on the current state of hunger in Seattle, the statistics, the current solutions which are being implemented, the gap between needs and solutions. We'll specifically talk about the flyby solution, which we're in the process of creating, and other solutions which combined can create a holistic solution for eradicating hunger in Seattle. And by the way, you'll see here on this slide and other slides that some of the words are in green. And whenever you see a word in green, that means that it is also the title of its own topic within spectral radius. So as you navigate throughout the different topics in spectral radius, you can specifically look for these topics to find out more information on them. So first of all, we're going to be talking about the state of hunger in the United States. And we are going to be delving into the realities of hunger in the United States. What, we need a picture. We need a rich picture painted of exactly what's going on. The number of people impacted both by hunger and by malnutrition. And again, breakdown by age, geography, etc. What are the root causes of hunger in the United States? What are the solutions that are currently being implemented? And what can we learn from those solutions? And what new solutions are being implemented and proposed? So going back to out of PowerPoint here. Can you see me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So when we, in developing this conversation to get all these answers about what is the current state of hunger in the United States, there are a number of people who we're going to be reaching out to. So think of this video segment as just the introduction to the topic and who we're going to reach out to, and then we're going to be scheduling a follow-up video conversation. And I'm going to be inviting folks from the nonprofit Feeding America. I'm going to be inviting Margie Ferris Morris of the World Hunger Education Service. I'm also going to reach out to Suzanne Collins, who's the author of The Hunger Games, which was actually had a strong emotional impact on me, and I'm sure on many other people, and got me thinking about this topic in a new way. I'll be inviting the folks from the Christian nonprofit Bread for the World, and from the government, I'm going to be inviting United States Congressman Dana Rohrabacher, who I know cares deeply about this topic and has a lot of insights about it. I'm going to be reaching out to folks from the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, or SNAP, the School Lunch Program, the School Break Program, providing food for those same students during school break, the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, and the Emergency Food Assistance Program. So we're going to be looking to learn about the overall picture of hunger in the United States, both from nonprofit organizations as well as government organizations at the federal, state, and local levels. Any other thoughts on that, Alyssa, in terms of the state of hunger in the United States currently and what's currently being done about it.
I think that's a good list to start off with.
Very good, very good. Alrighty, so look out for further updates in this very topic of hunger in the United States here within Spectral Radius, and we'll update you as to when we're going to schedule the next hangout on this topic. So next, let's go to our next topic, which is the current state of hunger in Seattle. So we're going to drill into, similarly to those same questions that we're focusing on at the national level. For Seattle, we're going to focus on what is the current situation in Seattle across all those dimensions, what current solutions are being implemented, and what is the degree of effectiveness and reach of each of those current solutions. For example, there are food banks. Well, what percentage of the hungry population is being adequately addressed by the food banks, for example, and what percentage by the soup kitchens, the homeless shelters, etc. And then, so essentially, that boils down to the question of what is the gap between the needs of the hungry and the solutions which are currently implemented. And then we'll look at new and expanded projects underway. One of those projects is Flyby. Flyby is a software company, a Seattle software company headed by Will Rademacher, who's quite a visionary. And he came up with the concept of essentially turning every business into having drive-through capability, enabling customers to place their order from home or from whatever location away from, say, the restaurant or whatever the business might be, the retail business. And then with their Flyby app, they'd be able to let the merchant know just by pressing a single button that they are on their way. And then the merchant then knows, because of GPS, how far away the customer is, and because of traffic data, what's the estimated time of arrival. And so essentially the retailer, which could be a restaurant, for example, they can then do a countdown. Okay, the customer is 18 minutes away, now 17, now 16, now 15, all the way down to when it's two minutes away, 1 minute away, and when the customer is about to arrive, the retailer comes out with their order, with their food, with their dry cleaning, whatever it is that they're coming to pick up. And so Will and I brainstormed about it and came up with the idea of applying the Flyby system and technology for enabling volunteers to go and pick up food at restaurants, say at the end of the day, after the restaurant has basically stopped serving customers. There's a bunch of food that they have that's perfectly good. It's just that they typically would just throw that into the dumpster and start fresh the next day rather than having day-old food. Well, with the Flyby system, we can enable volunteers to use the Flyby service and restaurants to use the service so that the restaurants can indicate when they're ready to have food picked up, how much food it is, and in what time window the restaurant needs for it to be picked up before they actually lock up for the night. And so Flyby volunteers, then seeing that, will be able to say, okay, I'll take that one, or I'll take this whole stretch of a particular commercial district, and I'll go, because I've got a station wagon and I've got plenty of room. And then using the Flyby system, those retailers then know exactly when the volunteer is coming. So the retailers, the restaurant owners, or workers can simply then bring the food out to the car of the volunteer when they park there, because they know exactly to the second when they're arriving. And then it makes it extremely efficient for everybody involved. There's complete visibility. The volunteer doesn't even need to get out of their car. They pick up the goods, they take them to the homeless shelter or to the food bank or wherever, and and we're good to go. It's widely known that the problem of food distribution to the hungry in the United States is a problem of logistics. There's more than enough food, and we throw away all the food that would be needed to feed the hungry. And so it's a matter of using logistics in efficient ways to be able to get that food to them. So that is the flyby solution, and this is simply one example of various different solutions that we can implement for eradicating hunger in the United States. So there are also holistic solutions that we're looking at in regards to addressing both hunger and homelessness, which are tightly correlated. We are looking into and want to open up conversations with folks about the possibilities of using schools and other public facilities to provide both homeless shelters at night and places where the hungry can be fed, because schools are everywhere. For example, public schools, private facilities for the similar purpose, and then fundraising is an important aspect of this. And we'll be addressing that within a much larger conversation, a much larger topic, which is that of the compassionate economy. And so the big picture goal here is to create a model in Seattle for eradicating hunger in Seattle, evolve that model, and as we're evolving it, share it with the world, and also learn from other models around the world for eradicating hunger in a given city, and really engage with the rest of the world in a dialogue about what are the best models, what are the best systems, what are the best technologies. So for example, with Flyby, we'd really like to optimize its use for this purpose in Seattle and then spread it around the world. Let restaurants and volunteers around the world use the system at no cost in order to facilitate delivery of food to the hungry. And this conversation is such a rich conversation to have. It's such a multidimensional conversation. It spans so many interrelated topics. We are going to be reaching out to, in addition to the folks I mentioned previously, here in the Northwest, in the Seattle area, we're going to be reaching out to DESC, which is one of the DESC, which is one of the leading homeless shelter organizations in the city. Northwest Harvest, the United Way of King County, as well as some of the other folks who are involved at the local level with the various food banks, the various churches who provide food and shelter to the homeless, et cetera, et cetera. So, and as regards the logistics aspect of it, because we're going to be figuring out the best ways to utilize Flyby and other technologies for the whole logistics network of getting food to those who need it, especially food that would otherwise be thrown away, not just from restaurants, but also from farms, food manufacturers, food distributors, etc. So we're going to be reaching out to all these different constituencies to join us in these conversations on Spectral Radius. So these will all be video conferences that we'll have. And those of you watching, if you think of other specific individuals who we should be inviting to the conversation, please write that in the comment section on this video on YouTube. We'll have other tools for capturing comments and suggestions later on directly within Spectral Radius, but for now, please just go ahead and use the comments capabilities of YouTube to enter those into this video. So for example, on the logistics network side, we'll be reaching out to Professor Alex Bayan at UC Berkeley, who has been one of the pioneers in technologies for optimizing large-scale logistics. I've also done a fair amount of that work myself, for example, with the CEMEX project, which I mentioned in the holistic global model video, which we have a separate topic for here on Spectral Radius. So that's a good one to check out. Also in Seattle, I'm going to be reaching out to former Mayor Mike McGinn, who I know is very passionate about this topic, current Mayor Ed Murray, Governor Jay Inslee, State Representative Roger Goodman, U.S. Congressman Jim McDermott, U.S. Senators Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell, both of whom are very active. I'll mention some stuff that Patty Murray is involved with shortly, as well as our friends at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation here in Seattle, and also PATH and some other nonprofits. We have so much talent right here in Seattle that if we bring this together using this medium of Spectral Radius to have these these focused conversations, then I think some amazing things are going to come out of it, and we truly can create a model for the rest of the country and for the rest of the world, as well as learn from other models. I mean, probably most of the things we're going to implement are going to be things we learn from other models in other cities, so it's really a collaborative thing. I'm just expressing that with everything that's coming to the table, everything that's converging in Spectral Radius currently, and in the weeks ahead, we have this golden opportunity to create an optimized model for the entire city of Seattle, which I think other cities will find very valuable. Other organizations we're going to be inviting to the conversation are the Hunger Intervention Program, Food Lifeline, based in Shoreline, just north of Seattle, a nonprofit that works on hunger relief throughout the entire state of Washington. We're going to reach out to, there's been a lot of really good press coverage on the topic of utilizing food that would otherwise be thrown away. We'll reach out to the Orlando Sentinel, which has done a lot of good coverage on this topic. And also Sarah Stuteville recently wrote on the topic in the Seattle Times just in the last week on exactly this topic. Senator Patty Murray, who I mentioned a moment ago, is sponsoring the Stop Child Summer Hunger Act. So you have children who normally get food through school, but in the summertime they've got a hunger problem, and so she's sponsoring that act at the federal level. Also, United States Representative Rick Larson, who is out of the Everett area, is sponsoring or supporting. Actually, he introduced a legislation called the Summer Meals Act of 2014, which is, in the House of Representatives, very similar to what Patty Murray is doing at the level of the Senate. So there's a lot of people we're going to be reaching out to engage with us in this conversation. I know I've mentioned quite a few. Any other thoughts, Alyssa, before we head on to the next topic?
No.
Okay. All right. So let me get back to PowerPoint here. And so one of the mechanisms that we're going to use for promoting this whole campaign to eradicate hunger in Seattle is the media. This image on the screen here is of a press conference that President Vicente Fox and I held in downtown Seattle at the end of May of 2013 on the topic of ending the failed system of prohibition of cannabis, and the resulting devastation to countries such as Mexico and the Central American countries and South America to a large degree, simply because of the failed system of prohibition and its creation of the drug cartels. They simply would not exist were it not for the system of prohibition. And so the process of repealing prohibition, which is another big paradigm shift, we found it very useful to hold public events, press conferences. We held a big summit meeting in San Francisco. We held a big 3-day conference in Mexico at Centro Fox, which was the #1 story in Mexico for 2 days straight. All of Mexico is extremely passionate about this topic. So I just mentioned that as an example because cannabis and cannabis prohibition, it was sort of one of those kind of taboo topics that weren't really talked about that much. I think hunger falls into that category. And so bringing it to the forefront and telling the media and therefore the world our story about what we're doing to end world hunger, starting right here in Seattle, creating a model that is sustainable and can be replicated throughout the country and throughout the world, that then leads us in to our next topic, which is precisely the topic of world hunger. So this topic of world hunger is a fascinating topic on multiple levels. First of all, it's a topic that not many people really like to think about or talk about because it conjures up very, very disturbing images and very, very disturbing realities in terms of the magnitude of world hunger, which we'll get into. But in terms of eradicating world hunger, the first thing we need to do is, again, take a very clear look at what is the state of hunger in the world, what are the numbers, what are the root causes of hunger, and what are the solutions. So each of these are in-depth topics on their own that we'll be delving into. Right now we're just giving a high-level introduction and identifying where we're going from here. So the data, the statistics, over 800 million people are hungry, and the most reliable statistic I've saw is an estimate that about 9 million people die of starvation every year. There are other estimates which are much higher, but regardless, the numbers are truly staggering. And what's fascinating is that world hunger is completely solvable, and we'll get into the solutions. There are really two sides to the solution. There's the financial side. There's raising the funds needed to eradicate hunger, and the second is the operational side, which is vastly more complex and will be the subject of many topics and subtopics related to it. I'll give a very brief introduction right now, and then we'll talk more about it in subsequent presentations. On the operational side, really it typically breaks down into relief, education, and long-term development projects. There's a fourth layer that I'll add in here, which is a holistic global solution, which spans all of those as well as many other dimensions. And I created a whole 14-minute video presentation on that topic, which you can see here in Spectral Radius as well. But other than that, I'm going to shift to the financial side. The operational is a huge topic. I have not begun to cover it. I've simply identified the subtopics, and will be so that I can mention who we're going to be, reaching out to engage in deeper conversations on all of these subtopics. In fact, I'll just list some of these folks in a moment. We're going to, let me just do something with my screen here. Okay. So on the topic of world hunger, both from the standpoint of causes and core causes, the state of hunger, as well as the solutions, I'm going to be reaching out to Ethran Cousin, who's the Executive Director of the World Food Program of the United Nations, Jeffrey Sachs, an economist with the UN, Ted Turner, Chairman of the United Nations Foundation, the Evolve campaigns in the United Kingdom, Marina Silva of the UN's Millennium Development Goals Advocacy Group, the Hunger Project, a nonprofit, non-governmental organization, UNICEF, the UN Children's Fund, the nonprofit Stop Hunger Now. We're going to be reaching out to have a conversation with Alan Savory about the technology that he and others have developed for reversing desertification and its harmful impacts on food production and climate change. So there's quite a few renowned experts who we're going to be reaching out to, quite a few others than the ones I just mentioned. Those are just some of the people we're going to be reaching out to have this conversation with. Now, let me talk about something really fascinating. So on the financial side, it turns out it's going to be relatively inexpensive to raise the funds needed to end world hunger, which a lot of people are surprised to hear. According to United Nations estimates, an additional $30 billion per year will be required to end world hunger. That's over and above the approximately $10 billion that are spent at a global level, mostly through the UN. And so the question is, well, how can we go about raising those additional funds? And an interesting fact is that if 1/3 of the companies in the world were to contribute 0.1% of their revenue, we would raise over $30 billion per year, and we would have the budget we need to eradicate world hunger. 0.1% of revenue is a very small sacrifice. It is a sacrifice, but if a critical mass of companies around the world participate in this and actually do it, then we will we will eradicate world hunger. We will have the funds to eradicate world hunger. Now, there's, again, a lot of other topics on the operations side that we haven't touched upon, which are very, very complex, and some are quite controversial. We will delve into all of those topics because we're seeking to create and orchestrate and bring together from the various different components out there already the solution to world hunger, and our goal is that we bring world hunger to an end by the end of this decade, by the year 2020. And a very important component to that is what we refer to as the compassionate economy. And the compassionate economy, we'll delve a bit more into that in a moment. But before we do, I want to talk about a new topic, which is important to talk about before we talk about the compassionate economy, which is the topic of the 3 stages of acceptance. The 3 stages of acceptance are, the first stage of acceptance is, that's crazy, that'll never work. The second stage of acceptance is, I know that that exists, but it doesn't impact me. And the third stage of acceptance is, well, of course that's the way we do it. What took you so long? And what's interesting is, this isn't 3 different perspectives from 3 different people all looking at 3 different perspectives of the elephant. No, this is one person, one human being going through the 3 stages. So the same person who at first says, hey, that's crazy, that'll never work, shortly thereafter, they'll find themselves saying, yeah, I know that what they're doing exists, but it doesn't affect me. And then finally, well, of course that's the way it's done. And that's precisely where we're going with the topic of the compassionate economy. At first, some people will say, that's crazy, that'll never work. Well, what is it? What is the compassionate economy? First and foremost, the compassionate economy is a concept. And people have been talking about this as a concept. Various different people have been using the term in different ways. But the overall concept is an economy that ensures that all human beings have a life free from violence, free from starvation, free from preventable illness and disease, and free from lawlessness, corruption, etc., etc. It's, in some senses, it's a utopia. The aim is certainly to maximize the potential of human life on Earth, free from the unnecessary suffering that we've managed to be subjected to or subject ourselves to, depending on how you look at it philosophically. But the compassionate economy is to reverse and transform the world's greatest problems. And the very first problem or issue that the compassionate economy seeks to address, we'll call this the compassionate economy version 1.0, is the first goal is to eradicate world hunger. Very simple. And is that, the only big global issue? No, there are many others, and they're all interrelated. And in fact, we cannot eradicate world hunger without impacting and being impacted by all of the other global transformational issues. So it's not like we're looking at this one issue in a bubble, but we are setting one specific goal, which is very limited. It's limited to the topic of hunger, and the goal is to end world hunger, to eradicate world hunger. We know what the budget is required, is approximately $30 billion per year in new funding. The commitment that's required is 0.1% of revenue. That 0.1% of revenue, those companies that make that commitment, will become members in the compassionate economy. And that membership will be communicated to consumers on the packaging of these companies, on their websites, their marketing materials. They can talk about it in the media. In fact, we're going to be holding several video conferences of this nature to showcase and highlight those companies which are becoming members of the Compassionate Economy, which is a nonprofit organization we recently founded. And to be a member of the Compassionate Economy, they must contribute 0.1% of their top-line revenue to the nonprofit organizations of their choice, as long as the money is earmarked for eradicating hunger. And it is our goal that this create a mass popular movement to where consumers will form a strong preference for products and services from compassionate companies, and so we can think of these as compassionate consumers. And what's fascinating here is that there is a deep, deep, deep unexpressed consumer need that all of us Americans, and I would extend it to everyone in the world, there's a deep unexpressed consumer need that all people have enough to eat. Each of us needs for everyone to have enough to eat. But for most of it, that resides as an unexpressed consumer need that we don't think about that much because it's very painful to contemplate, and most of us have essentially become resigned that global hunger is an intractable problem. But if we remember that that it's only $30 billion per year is the budget that we need to end world hunger, and that a very small sacrifice from less than half of the companies in the world, across all sizes of companies, would raise precisely that money. And so what we're doing here is we're essentially talking about creating a lifestyle brand and a mass popular movement, a global popular movement, in favor of the compassionate economy and in favor of compassionate companies, which make the small sacrifice but ongoing commitment of 0.1% of their top line revenue in order to eradicate world hunger. We believe this will grow to become a very, very popular story, because as consumers are able to tap into that deep unexpressed need that they have to ensure that everyone has enough to eat, as soon as consumers become aware that there is a solution out there and that they can participate in it, they can talk about it, they can join the conversation, and the consumers themselves are not asked to contribute even 1 penny to this whole effort. All they need to do is to develop a sensitivity and awareness of the concept of the compassionate economy and to develop a preference for products and services produced by compassionate companies. It's really that simple. You know, it can be as simple as putting on a wristband that says the compassionate economy, proud supporter, right? And voila, and people will ask, well, what's that? And then, of course, companies that join the compassionate economy and state that they're members of the compassionate economy, both in the press conferences that we'll be holding on their behalf for this purpose, as well as on their packaging and marketing materials, they will all be advertising and promoting the concept of the compassionate economy. So it becomes a virtuous cycle. And in fact, all of these topics are deeply interrelated. The topic of the compassionate economy, the topic of eradicating hunger in Seattle, the topic of eradicating hunger in the United States, the topic of eradicating world hunger, the topic of compassionate industries. And we'll be talking in a moment about the cannabis and hemp industry, which is positioning to become the world's first truly compassionate industry at an industry-wide level. We're also working with the food industry at the level of restaurants, food manufacturers, farmers, food processors, and food distributors in order to get the food industry working as a whole as a compassionate industry and working together with companies like Flyby in order to create a holistic solution for eradicating hunger in the United States and around the world. So all of this works together to create one heck of a story, right? I mean, if you're watching this right now, how can you not be like scratching your head and saying, wait a second, is it really that simple? Nothing's simple, but the key mechanisms of how we are going to transform this global, national and global issue and eradicate world hunger by the end of this decade, those key elements can be expressed in very simple terms. You raise the money that you need to do it by creating a mass popular movement, which consumers, companies, and the government all participate in, and the nonprofit sector, and it becomes a wave of compassion that sweeps the world and enables consumers to address this deep unexpressed consumer need. See, I look at it a lot of times from the marketing perspective. The most powerful opportunities in marketing are the ones that go after and successfully address an unexpressed consumer need. That's where the gold is. And so this is a gold mine opportunity for tapping into a huge unexpressed consumer need to see to it that everyone has enough to eat. There's a lot of people that we're going to be inviting into this conversation. We're going to, at the level of the 3 stages of acceptance, which is very, very important. I mean, I go into that in some detail, and we're going to be developing that topic because it's very, very important that we introduce people, consumers, citizens to this conversation in a way that's gentle and that's not too jarring, and in a way that basically says, hey, look, as you listen to this story, as you get into it, you're going to experience these 3 stages of acceptance. And it's totally okay. We all go through it. So just, we give them, it's essentially giving them a forewarning before they get on the roller coaster ride that it's going to be one heck of a ride, and, just keep the bar down and you'll be fine. So I'm really excited to talk with Tom Shadyac, who produced that amazing documentary film I Am, and many other great works, and also Michael Moore, two powerful documentary film producers, because they've been successful at changing people's paradigms through this medium. I'm also going to be talking with the folks from Left Field Productions in Los Angeles. We're working on creating a documentary series for this on this whole topic. And on the topic of the compassionate economy, I'm excited to talk with, I'll be reaching out to Noam Chomsky at MIT, philosophers such as John Searle and Dan Dennett. Alyssa, you turned me on to the Berkeley economist Robert Rake. I'll be reaching out to Bill Clinton as well, and also former Mexican President Vicente Fox, who we've done several events with already, with Uruguayan President Jose Mujica, an extremely compassionate leader. We'll be reaching out to Karen Armstrong and others involved in the Charter for Compassion. We'll be reaching out to the Dalai Lama. I don't know if he does video conferences, but it'd sure be cool to have him in on this conversation. And we'll also be reaching out to the family of the late Nobel Peace Prize winner Wangari Maathai. So, Alyssa, any thoughts either on the topic or who we might also consider inviting to the conversation?
I don't have anyone else to add to the conversation, but I think that it's important to just point out that the reason to invite so many people is that conversation leads to action and finding the best solution. So it's important that great minds come together instead of working independently so that we can solve the problems quicker and more efficiently.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, and that really gets to the heart of the whole concept of spectral radius. So be sure to watch the segment on spectral radius, which is a separate topic, and we'll get more into that. But just to reinforce, I mean, what we're able to do through this medium of video conferences with Google Hangouts is we're able to bring together people very, very quickly on very short notice, because you basically just have to be at your desk. It's not like you need to fly anywhere to go to a conference or something. So we don't need to schedule the meetings months in advance. We can schedule the meetings even minutes in advance in some cases. And the fact that they're completely transparent and it's all recorded, it'll all be saved, so there'll be archives of this conversation and all the conversations that follow, even a year from now. So we'll be able to trace back and see, so how did we get to this point in the conversation? And, why are we all operating on this assumption? Well, go 3 videos back and you can see how we had the in-depth conversation which resulted in the confirmation of this assumption, whatever the case may be. So it's just an incredibly powerful way to bring people together. So great points. Alrighty, let's go on to our next topic, which is which will lead us up to the topic of the first compassionate industry. And that topic is, oh, before I get there, I'm sorry, we're not ready to change topics yet. A lot of people are going to ask questions about, well, what about overpopulation and the carrying capacity of the planet? I mean, if you're going to, eradicate hunger and feed all these people, then, they're going to be able to have more children. Well, let's have that conversation. I mean, when I've heard that question addressed, there's almost like an implicit assumption that mass starvation at a global level by hundreds of millions of people is a good policy for population control. right? And it turns out there's a lot of policies for population control, a lot of very different policies. And certainly the least humane is mass starvation. And it actually turns out that if we were to pursue a policy of mass starvation, it would actually paradoxically generate more population growth. It actually has. By allowing mass starvation to exist, we've actually accelerated population growth. That's a very deep topic. But anyway, bottom line, these are conversations that are very important to have, so we'll have those here in Spectral Radius. So look out for new topics and subtopics on those lines. And then other people will ask, well, what about the dictators who steal food and other resources from their people? Well, let's talk about them. Let's talk specifics, and let's look at and let's actually reach out to those governments and invite them to join us on a video conference to talk about this, to say, look, we're now developing plans for getting food and other resources to your people who are starving. Would you be willing to let us do that? Would you like to work with us to let us do that in a way that's totally transparent? Because a lot of people are going to say, no, don't send money to that country because this, or don't send resources, don't send food because the dictator is going to steal all the food and sell it and just pocket all the money, and it's all going to be wasted, right? Let's get into specifics and actually work the problem rather than just assume the problem is unsolvable, right? So anyway, I'm just saying let's talk about it all. Anyway, for more on the topic of world hunger, I point to these other topics. And on the compassionate economy, so remember I said the first thing we're focusing on is the problem of ending world hunger. Ending world hunger is just the beginning. Once we have once our plan is sufficiently in motion and we can see a clear path to eradicating hunger by the end of this decade, that will open up a lot of space for us to be able to discuss other topics of global importance, such as natural resource depletion, natural resource management, climate change, housing for people. I mean, once you've got their basic needs met in terms of food, what about basic shelter? What about basic health care, which can be provided at a mass scale, very, very economically, as folks such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have demonstrated. And so, and then from there, education and human rights, et cetera, et cetera. So, ending world hunger is going to accomplish two things. Number one, it's going to give us a platform from which, below which humanity will not fall, and above which we can build all these other amazing things and amazing solutions. But number two, ending world hunger will show us as a species, as humanity, that we can take on a major global transformational issue and successfully transform it in this case, in relatively short time, by the end of this decade. And so it's really, ending world hunger is sort of like this, it's kind of like the psychological barrier, like the 4-minute mile. Before Roger Bannister, whoever the heck it was who broke the record, the 4-minute mile, no one could touch it. But once he broke through it, then all these other runners started to break the 4-minute mile. It became routine. And likewise, I make the analogy with other sort of these kind of intractable global problems like shelter and basic health care and peace and education and human rights and environmental sustainability and et cetera, et cetera. A lot of these are seen as intractable problems, like it's just not going to get to everyone. Well, who says? If we put our minds to it and work together on it, like which is what we're doing here on Spectral Radius, then we can transform all these issues. Anyway, that's what the Compassionate Economy version 2.0 and beyond are all about. So now we'll get to the next topic, which is the topic of ECO, ICCCO, the International Coalition of Cannabis Companies and Organizations, which is the International Trade Association for the global cannabis and hemp industry. And we're going to talk about why we formed ECO. The aims of ECO are to build a foundation, first of all, build a solid foundation for the cannabis and hemp industry. and which simply doesn't exist right now because it's still, an illegal drug by the 1961 Single Convention Treaty of the United Nations, which really creates the foundation for the global failed system of prohibition, which is causing so much harm in the world. So a parallel aim is to provide an exit strategy for the UN 1961 Single Convention Treaty. And when we talk about building a foundation for the industry, I very much mean in the architectural sense of analogy, rather, of building a solid foundation that has span, that has depth, that has dimensionality, that will help support the industry through its growth and also through the achievement of its goals. And so, what would the elements of this foundation be? Well, there's the legal code, the model legal code for the cannabis and hemp industry, and we're going to be talking with, for example, Allison Holcomb, principal author of Initiative 502 in Washington State, establishing the legalization of cannabis here in Washington State. Likewise, with leaders in Colorado, such as Christian Cederberg and Brian Vicente of Denver, for the conversation of how to create a model legal code for the cannabis and hemp industry, which can be used by the entire world. See, right now everyone's kind of rolling their own legal code. Uruguay's doing their own thing, Washington's doing its own thing, Colorado its own thing, Maryland will do its own thing, etc. And there's a very good analogy to the topic of the model penal code, and I think I'll create another topic for that and have a conversation about that with some legal experts. But anyway, we need to do a similar process for the cannabis and hemp industry. And in parallel with that are model rules and regulations for the industry, model policy for the industry. And for that, we'll be talking with John Davis, Graham Boyd, and other policy experts on drug policy. We'll be talking about and curating international standards for the cannabis and hemp industry. So these are all vital foundational components for the cannabis and hemp industry. But what is the bedrock upon which we want to build the industry? And I'll just go back to this other slide. I picked this image because it shows a foundation and actually shows the bedrock upon which the foundation is sitting. What do we want for the bedrock of the cannabis and hemp industry to be? Well, the answer from the industry has been virtually unanimous: compassion. We want to be the world's first compassionate industry. And what exactly does it mean to build the world's first compassionate industry? And so that gets us on to our next topic, the first compassionate industry, the cannabis and hemp industry. And so when we talk about building building the industry on a bedrock of compassion, we had a lot of in-depth conversations about, well, what does it mean to create the world's first compassionate industry? And the obvious topics for the cannabis and hemp industry of compassion for patients, compassion for youth, minimizing or eliminating youth access and availability. So, for example, under the failed system of prohibition, youth have tremendous access to cannabis because drug dealers don't card. Under a system of responsible legalization and regulation, it becomes much more like the liquor industry, where liquor store owners do card because their whole business and livelihood is at stake. So anyway, so compassion for youth, compassion for other countries such as Mexico, which have been suffering horribly under the failed system of prohibition and the resulting drug war, the drug war that was created by the failed system of prohibition, the drug cartels, which were created by the failed system of prohibition. So there's plenty to talk about and focus on as regards compassion right here within the cannabis and hemp industry and on those issues and topics which are directly impacted by the cannabis and hemp industry. However, we were faced with the question in building the foundation for this industry: do we only focus on those topics which are those topics which are pertaining to compassion, which are directly impacted by the cannabis and hemp industry, or do we go broader? And that actually became the genesis of the conversation that, hey, we could actually create a whole new kind of industry not just build a solid foundation and not just focus on compassion within that which is directly impacted by us, but we can actually look at a much bigger picture and say what would be required, for example, to do our part to end world hunger. And for example, I mean, that's, there are many, many issues that are related to compassion beyond cannabis and hemp, which are global issues, which, we could take the position, well, we in the cannabis and hemp industry, we didn't cause world hunger, so we're really not going to, it's not our problem to solve. But, the problem is if every single industry takes that same position that, hey, I didn't cause this, so it's not my problem to solve, guess what? The problem doesn't get solved. Governments have not solved the problem. The United Nations has not solved the problem. So rather than just say, well, what can we do? There's nothing we can do. There's a lot we can do. Well, there's a whole other angle to this problem, which is at the level of industries. What if the industries of the world come together and say, let's solve this problem? So we in the cannabis and hemp industry, and with ECO leading the charge at an international level, we said, let's define what it would mean to be a compassionate industry. And step number one to being a compassionate industry is to be that industry which both forms a solid pillar for the compassionate economy and also creates a model that other industries can replicate. And so we opted for simplicity, and we're working. So the cannabis and hemp industry is working with the nonprofit, the Compassionate Economy, in order to determine what would be the simplest, most replicatable model, most inspiring model for other industries to follow. And that's when we eventually came upon the concept of the Compassionate Economy version 1.0, which I've talked about, which is very, very, very simple. It simply calls for companies around the world to contribute 0.1% of their revenue. And with that, they join. They become certified members of the Compassionate Economy, and then they have the right to communicate that through whatever forms. So that's the big picture as far as where we're going with the cannabis and hemp industry. And now we can talk about some certain specifics. So again, the focus is on the compassionate economy. Be the first model industry member of the compassionate economy, and help other industries to see what we're doing. So communicate what we're doing with the first compassionate industry, and our focus on the compassionate economy version 1.0, the 0.1% contribution. The companies then, the cannabis and hemp companies that join the compassionate economy become certified as compassionate businesses, forming the pillars of the compassionate economy. And we are going to provide a platform, which is this platform of Spectral Radius, to provide these businesses an opportunity to tell their story and to talk about their commitment to compassion. And that turns out has a lot of benefit for these companies, because these companies, which up until now, being in the cannabis and hemp industry, have been largely in the closet, we can say, in terms of communicating who they are, what they stand for, what they're doing, because they've been engaged in an activity which is still federally illegal. And so you take that situation of the cannabis and hemp industry being, kind of in the shadows, give the companies of the industry an opportunity to come out publicly in strong support of a compassionate economy and ending world hunger. And you're now presenting these companies in an entirely new light. And so there's, the analogy that I use for that is that it's like we're taking the cannabis and hemp industry from being, kind of the black sheep of the global economy to being a white knight, to being that industry which leads the other industries of the world in becoming compassionate industries and telling the story. And what a clear, simple story it is from the standpoint of financial contribution. 0.1%. It's as simple as that. It's not a big deal. It's not a lot of money. And so this will dovetail and be a part of the larger story of ending world hunger first in Seattle and creating the model of eradicating hunger in U.S. cities, spreading that model throughout the various different cities of the United States, extending the conversation to the global level, introducing the concept of the compassionate economy, the compassionate industries, etc. All of these stories are mutually complementary. And as I'm about to show here on the slide, the next slide, these form the, well, all of this is part of a plan where the overall steps are start local, give the media a story. And so, for example, particularly when we're in the first stage of acceptance across a lot of people across the country and around the world, a big part of the story will be, hey, these folks from the cannabis and hemp industry think that they're going to end world hunger. Isn't that ridiculous? Ha ha ha, right? Well, that's the first stage of acceptance. And when that happens, that's actually a good thing, because it shows that people have gotten to the first stage of acceptance, which is, that's crazy, that'll never work, right? So we've got their attention, we've got them laughing, we've got them passionate, you know, saying that that can't work, or this is crazy, or there's something wrong with the cannabis and hemp industry taking the lead and being the lead model industry of the compassionate economy. Great. Bring on the criticism, bring on the controversy. The controversy, that's all part of the it's all part of the process. Then we're going to be developing the global conversation about this, both through the media and through Spectral Radius, and we'll lead the world through the 3 stages of acceptance. So starting local, and again I refer back to the earlier segments on eradicating hunger in Seattle and on Flyby. We are going to hold a press conference in Seattle where we'll bring many of the pillars of the community to the press conference to talk about what it means to them to eradicate hunger in Seattle, and what their commitment is, and what their perspectives are on the compassionate economy, and what their perspectives are on Seattle being the first compassionate city within the compassionate economy. And at the end of the press conference, these very pillars of Seattle, I'm going to invite Bill Gates, Nathan Myhrvold, Paul Allen, Jeff Bezos, and other tech visionaries, because for the Flyby piece anyway, it's very much a technology solution. Invite them to, at the end of the press conference, go down to their cars with their smartphone, with the Flyby app installed, and select one of the various parts of town where food can be picked up, is waiting to be picked up to be delivered to homeless shelters. We'll have this coordinated in advance. They hit the button, on my way, and they go. And as they're doing the pickup and delivery of food for the hungry, a reporter is riding shotgun along with them, covering the story, right, and getting their reactions. And that all plays into giving the media a story. And at the same press conference, we'll have representatives from the cannabis and hemp industry proudly stating that we are leading the creation of the world's first compassionate industry and expanding this around the world via the cannabis and hemp industry as a vector. That gives the media a really big story to talk about. The co-founders of Cannabis Now magazine are very excited to run the story. And even focus on it in one of their upcoming issues. And they're committed to being the first compassionate magazine, contributing 0.1% of their revenue to ending world hunger. And all of this feeds a story about hunger in America's cities, eradicating hunger, which is the really, the positive part of the story, which is not only is it a big problem, but we've actually got a solution. And you've got a lot of very powerful, influential people who are participating in the solution, participating in architecting the solution, participating in financing the solution, and all the various different people that we've talked about. And so, for example, in building the first compassionate industry, I'm going to be inviting Rick Steves into the conversation, who's been just a tremendous leader in this whole topic. And in fact, he was the one who got me excited about making a difference in ending prohibition. And with his whole, it's time for a conversation. Let's have a conversation. Well, who can deny that? And in fact, the whole genesis of Spectral Radius is really building on that. Let's have a conversation, not just about ending prohibition, but about ending world hunger and transforming all the world's global issues. Why not? I'm going to be reaching out to Rick Cusick of High Times Magazine, Dr. Dale Geringer of California Normal, Dr. Lester Grinspan of Harvard, Steph Scherer of Americans for Safe Access, Aaron Smith of the National Cannabis Industry Association, who's pictured here on the right, and of course President Vicente Fox, who's pictured here just to my left. In fact, the image in the upper right was the front page story on the Seattle Times the very next morning, Friday, May 31st of 2013. The media loves stories like this, which completely smash the old paradigms of what's possible and what's impossible. And so I'm committed. I'm committing my life to this cause. And so every single day I'm going to be working on expanding and spreading the conversation, which is the very next step that we outlined a minute ago. And in developing the global conversation, we're pioneering this new medium. It's really kind of a hybrid of media. There's the brain software that we're using, and it's pictured above. This is an implementation of the brain software where you see all these different topics and subtopics, and not just subtopics, but sibling topics. The ones to the left are sibling topics, and the ones above are parent topics. So you've got this rich network of topics and interconnected topics, and whenever you click on any one topic, well, you just play around with the brain and or with Spectral Radius to see how it works. But the idea is we can then have these in-depth conversations like we're having right now with rich media, with PowerPoint, with video, with live broadcast video conferences, which are then recorded, giving us essentially, perfect memory of exactly what was discussed, who discussed which topics, what did they have to say about it, how did we get to this point in the conversation. See, none of that is lost when it's recorded. And so we're huge believers in the broadcast and recorded Google Hangout. So put it all together, and we're forming a global conversation where we're pulling in world leaders and experts and passionate individuals and volunteers and folks who've sacrificed tremendously to work for the nonprofit organizations that they're so passionate about. All of these people have developed an incredible amount of wisdom and knowledge and information and network, which is required. Bring it all together under the umbrella of Spectral Radius, where you have these ongoing conversations in such a rich format, all organized by topic and subtopic and subtopic, and you have the beginnings of something which, to my knowledge, has never been created before, and which is one of those things which is what the internet is really was invented for, this kind of rich sharing and rapid evolution of conversations and solutions. Alyssa, any thoughts on this?
Nope.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate your listening, because that's really helping. That way, I'm not just talking into thin air here. And also, I invite everyone to join in on the conversation and post your own thoughts, your own comments about it. I mean, this is just the beginning. Right now, these are just introductory videos, just to kind of set the tone and the initial topics. And of course, as we move along, more and more topics are going to be created. So whenever you hear or think, well, what about this? Think a new topic, and then we can create that topic. And please reach out if you want to participate in these conversations, in these video conferences, or give your own presentation, or organize your own video conference. Please do. It's very easy to do with Google Hangout, and then you can submit what you produce to the site. We don't have those tools set up yet, but in the coming weeks we'll get that all created. In the meantime, you can just reach out to us through probably through eco.org would be the best way for starters. But as soon as spectralradius.com is live, so please submit your requests or or even links to Hangouts that you've created through the site, spectralradius.com. And finally, we'll lead the world through the 3 stages of acceptance. And really, ending world hunger, again, it is just the beginning. And that will create an amazing platform for food security being the single biggest component to overall security. So by eradicating world hunger, we'll reduce a lot of the motivation for war, and will set us on a path, as I discussed earlier, to transforming all global issues. And Spectral Radius is the medium that we've created to facilitate that, conversations for global transformation. We're just it's just so amazing how much ground you can cover, how quickly, and how easy it is for folks to participate. One way to think of Spectral Radius is as a dimensionally enhanced social network, because here, whereas in a traditional social network like Facebook, most of the media is images and text, because that's what people are really comfortable sharing. They can control it, right? You get on a video conference, and it's very hard to predict exactly what's going to happen. So it requires sort of a stepping out of your comfort zone in a way. At least that's how it's been for me. But once you get into it and see the richness of it and the power and the potential, I mean, we are here to collaborate on the transformation of the world's most pressing issues, starting with world hunger, which affects hundreds of millions of people, and creates terrible conditions where entire populations are vulnerable to those who would put it into a state of conflict, and so they're exploited. The suffering is exploited, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many global transformational issues. A majority of scientists are very concerned about climate change, sea level rise, and the sustainability of life on planet Earth. And so, really, we're talking the topics of global transformation. This mechanism of taking one of those, transforming it, leveraging this rich new medium for doing that in much faster than would otherwise happen. That's all going to bring together the very people who can then take the world to the next step and work on other global transformational issues together. I mean, can you imagine, once we've eradicated world hunger, that's going to give us as a community so much confidence in our ability to transform global issues that we'll say, great, what's next? Let's take it on. And from sort of from an information sciences perspective, if you think about the potential of what we can do here by all these minds coming together with topics organized, as you can see in Spectral Radius, and have this rapid feedback and sharing of information, it can be thought of as a higher form of intelligence, because you're bringing together multiple different minds, collaborating, sharing. We have essentially perfect memory, since it's all recorded and you can play it back, and it will be turned into transcripts, which are then searchable. So you've got more processing power, better memory, more connections, richer sort of synaptic connections between people, between topics. From an information sciences perspective, that's the formula for a higher form of intelligence. So, that's one way to think about Spectral Radius, is as a higher form of intelligence. So, there's a few other folks I wanted to mention in the developing the topic of Spectral Radius and talking about how we can evolve this medium and what we can accomplish with it. I'm excited to reach out to Nathan Mervold and invite him to the conversation. He and Charlie Rose had a really great interview not too long ago, and a very interesting conversation about who might play decisive leadership roles in transforming the world's most pressing issues, including world hunger. And so we'll post that on Spectral Radius, so you all can see it. I'm excited to invite both of those folks to the conversation. also the Google founders, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, and also the founders of Wikipedia, Jimmy Wales and Larry Sanger, and other folks, who are visionaries in terms of the internet and the different media of communication and collaboration. Because I really think we're on the cusp of something truly amazing here. So that's why I'm dedicating my life to this, and to seeing to it that we eradicate world hunger and get on a path to transforming the other issues. And I invite you all to join. Alyssa, any thoughts?
Yeah, maybe just a few parting thoughts. I think it's just important moving forward that anyone who wants to partake in this conversation just be open-minded, because I think that will really allow the conversation to fly. And then I think it's important to get impossible out of the vocabulary, because a lot of times we think, oh, that's impossible, but that's not true. And then I also think it's important to take responsibility, because we have to stop assuming someone else will. So we as human beings have to take responsibility for our fellow human beings and need to do that moving forward. And we also need to realize that we can make a difference on an individual level, because a lot of times that's hard to believe.
Yeah. No, really great points. In fact, I mean, my own experience with this is very, very telling to me, which is that I had been working on the kind of the software and technology side for creating a system to facilitate the kind of the orchestration of the eradication of hunger around the world in a long-term sustainable way, and that you can see that on the topic of the holistic global model, which is one of the topics here on Spectral Radius. And so I was working on that and coming up with what I think is a great technology architecture for it, but there was still the problem of the money. And how are we gonna raise the money to do this? We're talking about many billions of dollars. And then along comes the end of prohibition of cannabis, which I really didn't have anything to do with up until late 2012, and I saw that prohibition was ending and legalization was taking its place, which was going to create a whole new marketplace, a giant multi-hundred-billion-dollar marketplace for cannabis and hemp. And so I saw an opportunity to jump in and really, create the #1 brand of cannabis in the world. And if you Google brand of marijuana, for example, the last time I checked, the #1 and #2 links were about that brand that I created. And so, and then with the events that we did with President Vicente Fox, with U.S. Congressman Dana Rohrabacher, and other leaders, I found out just how much power we all have if we come together and collectively set about solving or transforming a major issue. In that case, it was prohibition. So I was talking with John Davis one day and preparing my speech, my opening speech for the 3-day conference that President Fox and I organized in Mexico. And John made the point that that prohibition is one of the top global transformational issues of our time, and it was just like a light bulb went off for us. It was like, wow, if we can transform this issue, and we are, why not use this as an access for transforming all of the world's global transformational issues? And that was the gist of my keynote speech at the conference that President Fox and I co-organized. And ever since then, it's just been like this passion of mine that how do we scale that up, and so extend it to other global issues. And of course, the next biggest one, or the biggest one of all, for me anyway, is world hunger. And so that was really the genesis for all of what we've recorded here today in these various different segments. So anyway, I really appreciate your comments, Alyssa, because that really helped me to connect with what got me here. And it's just realizing that we have so much more power than we think. We do have the power to end world hunger. And, either sit back and watch or jump in and participate. But, either way, I think it's going to be really hard for people not to get swept up into this global movement in a very
That's the case for me.
Alrighty. Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Nope, I think that covered it.
Alrighty. Any other thoughts? Anyone here? Well, let me just scan real quick because we've certainly covered some amazing ground. I think let's just wrap it for now because we can always do another another hangout. That's one of the beauties of this. It's so easy to just click. Let's do a hangout, record it, and post it. And so we're really working on creating a whole community here. So please reach out and say, hey, I'd like to be a part of this. Here's what I'd like to talk about. Let's talk about this. Go ahead and post it on the comments of the YouTube channel, and one of us will reach out to you and we'll have a conversation, and maybe we'll do a recorded video hangout for the whole world to see. That's the beauty of this. You jump into the conversation, you get to share the best of what you know and who you know, and your creative ideas, and we just all get together. 2 heads are better than 1. Well, 500 heads are better than 2, and 50,000 heads are better than 500, and on and on and on. I mean, I envision this becoming a community that grows well into the millions, tens of millions. Why not the billions? Why not this be something that everyone is involved in? Because there are so many different topics to cover that are, I mean, we're going to have hundreds of thousands of topics before we're through, because there are so many specific topics. Every single country and their hunger problems are a specific topic unto themselves with many subtopics underneath them. And relief, there are just so many topics under relief, so many topics under education, so many topics under long-term development projects, so many topics between the correlations and the relationships between war and conflict and hunger and natural resource depletion and everything else. So it's all so interconnected.
And there's so many solutions that have already been implemented.
Exactly. So many solutions that have already been implemented. We simply need to highlight them, showcase them, have an interview with the person who created that solution and the person who led the implementation of it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That whole team. And let's get different teams of different experts who've worked on different solutions coming together to figure out how we're going to create the best holistic solutions to all these different problems. So anyway, exciting times ahead. Thank you all for watching, and please join the conversation. We'd love to talk with you. Thanks so much. Take care.